It's curious how certain moments arrive without warning, breaking the ordinary fabric of days like a flame that ignites in the dark before we even notice the candle. There's a moment, almost imperceptible, when you feel you're no longer the same figure who traversed life with quick steps and borrowed certainties. The city remains alive, noisy, illuminated, but you realize you've taken half a step outside the scene. The world still speaks, still sings, still spins, but you observe everything from a slightly displaced angle, as if you've discovered a crack between the real and the symbolic. And it is there, in that narrow and silent place, that the first breath of awakening arises. Not that triumphant awakening that so many imagine, but one that arrives discreetly, almost timidly, as if afraid of disturbing what still sleeps within you. Carl Jung said that the unconscious announces itself in whispers before revealing itself in storms. And this initial perception is exactly that, a whisper. Suddenly, what once seemed solid becomes permeable. What seemed definitive takes on shifting contours. And the narrative you considered your own, built with so much effort, reveals itself to be like an image projected in an empty movie theater. Convincing, exciting, but still a projection. It's like waking up from a movie you believed to be your whole life, only to discover that the credits had already rolled while you were still trying to understand the plot. At that moment, a strange, almost melancholic feeling arises. The familiar faces are still there, but something shifts in the way you perceive them. The conversations sound different, as if some of them are being said merely to fill the air. The laughter doesn't echo as before. The presences once so close seem shrouded in a light mist. You recognize everything, but you no longer feel a sense of belonging in the same way. Jung would call this the first fracture between the persona and the self. The moment when the mask used to navigate the world begins to become too heavy for you to believe in it. And it is precisely there that an inevitable, almost uncomfortable question arises. If something within me has awakened, what happens to everything that previously seemed sufficient? This question is the beginning of a dangerous process, for it opens a door that can never be closed. From this point on, you become responsible not only for your steps, but for the entire direction of your inner movement. You realize that there are people who can help you maintain the clarity of this awakening, and others who, even unintentionally, can pull you back into the old dream. And this is not due to judgment or superiority, but simply to the fact that each person vibrates at a different stage of consciousness, and your newly lit flame is still sensitive to the wind of unconscious influences. Awakening, however subtle it may seem at first, demands choices. It demands discernment. It demands a kind of silent courage that doesn't manifest in heroic gestures, but in the quiet firmness of remaining true to what has become evident within you. This is where many stumble, confusing love with the absence of limits, confusing compassion with unrestricted surrender. But Jung always warned that light is born from confrontation with shadow, and part of that confrontation involves admitting that certain presences, certain energies, certain human patterns can dilute your spiritual clarity before you even realize it. As you delve into this inner territory, you begin to notice that some people live as if they were trapped in their own psychic labyrinths. They don't just sleep, they defend their sleep as if it were the only possible form of existence. And it is at this point that tension arises, because when you mention that you have discovered an opening in the fabric of reality, that you have realized that the self is not an island separate from the universe, but a continuous flow with it, these people shudder. Not because you threaten them, but because your perception shakes their internal architecture. These individuals, who I swear seem made of certainties, build an entire identity on the idea that everything is exactly as it appears to be. For them, questioning is dangerous, deep thinking is risky, admitting mystery is almost a moral disorder. They cling to ready-made explanations, like someone holding a plank in a stormy sea. If something doesn't fit into the boxes they use to organize the world, it's immediately discarded. For them, the unknown is not an invitation, it's a threat. When you cross their paths again, you realize that your words, once received naturally, now seem uncomfortable, as if you were carrying a musical note too dissonant for the melody they insist on playing. This is where the first form of resistance appears. These convicted sleepers, as Jung would probably recognize them in symbolic terms, try to convince you that you are imagining too much, feeling too much, suspecting too much. Not because they wish you harm, but because your change forces them to look at something they prefer not to see. Your worldview threatens their internal stability, and the automatic defense is to bring you back to the old narrative, where everything had its place, form, and explanation. The drama intensifies when you realize that part of you desires precisely that, to return, to regain the comfort of the known, to extinguish the spark that began to illuminate dangerous territories. But there is another part, the one Jung would call the inner guide, that refuses to allow regression. This part knows that awakening is not a path of return, but a path of crossing. And every time you try to go back to what you were, the unconscious itself seems to push you forward again, as if to say, "You have seen too much to forget." The crucial question then arises, how to keep the newly discovered light burning, without allowing it to be stifled by the forces that want everything to remain the same. This is the first challenge of awakening, a subtle, silent, inner challenge, but perhaps the most fundamental of all. Because it's not about fighting anyone, it's not about proving anything, it's not about becoming a missionary of your own vision, it's simply about protecting the integrity of what is being born within you. However, this simple task becomes gigantic when it involves human relationships. You realize that loving doesn't mean staying. Respecting doesn't mean accepting influences that diminish you. Compassion doesn't mean allowing yourself to be taken back to your previous state just to avoid conflict. A new kind of responsibility arises, the responsibility to remain awake, even when it implies gently distancing yourself from those who, out of their own necessity, try to keep you in the old way. This awakening creates a new vibration in the air, like a subtle prelude to something greater. It's the first hint that the path ahead will be demanding, beautiful, and unpredictable. And deep down, a question begins to form, still timid, but insistent. If this is only the first symbolic person to be avoided after awakening, what other figures await you in the shadows of the journey? This question, left open like a half-open door, begins to throb within you. And without realizing it, you are already leaning towards crossing it. It's amazing how some people, even when wishing you well, try to protect themselves from the light you begin to see. When you say that something has changed, that there's an inner clarity that didn't exist before, they smile with a mixture of affection and discomfort. They ask you to be calm, not to complicate what is simple, not to be carried away by exaggerated ideas. But deep down, what does this simplicity they wish to preserve really mean? Often it's just maintaining what is familiar, the desire to keep intact a world they believe they understand. And when you touch this structure with your renewed perception, they defend it like someone protecting an old house from cracks, not out of malice but out of fear. Jung knew that human beings fear the unknown within themselves more than any external danger, and that's why so many are uneasy when they see someone awaken. This unease arises in common situations. You're sitting at a table with loved ones, talking about something you've recently noticed. A profound intuition, a shift in perspective, a feeling that life is more than routine allows. The atmosphere changes. Someone smiles sadly. Another makes a joke, as if helping to lighten the mood. Another changes the subject, uncomfortable. And you realize that this moment, so simple, becomes a revealing mirror. It's not you who feels strange, it's their sensitivity that still can't bear certain truths. The conversation, which was once light, now seems narrow, as if the space has shrunk. And while you try to explain something you feel, you notice that your words fall on hardened ground. Nothing germinates there. It is then that awareness deepens. There's no point in insisting. It's a time for silence, but there's something more subtle happening. Sometimes these people try to bring you back to the familiar zone with an almost loving gentleness. They say you're tired, that you're exaggerating, that you're over-interpreting things. They ask you to go back to sleep like them because, without realizing it, they associate security with falling asleep. And so, with the best intentions, they offer you the blanket they use to cover their own restlessness. It's at this point that you feel the temptation to return. After all, Wouldn't it be simpler to move on pretending nothing has changed? It would be less lonely, undoubtedly. But while this idea crosses your mind, something inside you, the same something Jung describes as the symbolic face of the self, rises with silent firmness. It's a voice that doesn't shout, but also doesn't give in. You can't go back. And then, when you accept this inner fact, you begin to notice the second figure that emerges on the journey of awakening. It appears in a more enchanting, more seductive, almost magical way. At first glance, it seems to understand you better than anyone else. It uses familiar words, talks about energy, purpose, expansion, essence. Perhaps it mentions dreams, signs, synchronicities. It may even touch on Jung's name with a certain reverence, as if sharing the same symbolic quest. But something doesn't quite fit. Not immediately, but gradually. It's as if there's an artificial glow, a reflection where there should be depth. You feel, even without wanting to feel it, that there's more appearance than truth. And this begins to awaken a very different kind of unease than the previous one. This type of person, so difficult to identify at first, seems awake. They know how to create the perfect atmosphere, that mystical aura that seduces those in transition. Their words are smooth, well-crafted, almost impeccable. But observing them closely, you realize they don't move from direct experience. They move from the need to be seen. That's where the shadow of the ego appears, skillfully disguised. Jung always warned that the ego has infinite creativity to reinvent itself, and here it shows itself in the details, in how the conversation changes tone when you share something true, in how veiled comparisons arise, in how each of your accounts is followed by a larger, deeper, more impactful account from them. It's as if the light you lit needs to compete with theirs. This phenomenon becomes even clearer in small, almost banal situations. Imagine you're talking to this person in a cafe. You mention an internal change you've recently felt, something intimate and genuine. They smile, close their eyes for a second, and respond with a carefully constructed, almost rehearsed phrase. Then they tell a similar story, but always with greater intensity, as if it were necessary to establish an invisible hierarchy about who understands more, who perceives more, who is closer to a secret truth. And you, without realizing it, begin to wonder, am I falling behind? Is my experience not as profound as I thought? Suddenly, something inside you begins to play a role, trying to match, trying to prove that it too is awake. That's how the danger appears. The risk is never in the person themselves, but in the silent invitation they offer. The invitation to transform awakening into a spectacle, to be seen as someone enlightened, someone who understands, someone who inspires. It's easy to fall into this because the ego loves this kind of stage. It loves to dress up in humility to receive admiration, and when you least expect it, you're already adjusting your words, choosing what to say to seem balanced, meditating longer to appear profound, photographing moments of silence to prove you're experiencing something meaningful. It's the beginning of a prison so gentle it feels like freedom, and this trap manifests itself in unexpected ways. You are at home, sitting on the floor during a moment of genuine introspection. The silence is perfect. There is a gentle clarity in the air. But then an almost imperceptible thought arises. What if I shared this? What if someone saw the beauty of this instant? It's a subtle sin, an almost innocent deviation, but this small internal movement is enough to realize that the purity of the experience has been contaminated. The truth is no longer completely there, because presence has been replaced by performance. And when you realize this, a deep unease arises. How could I have distanced myself from myself so quickly? It is at this moment that you hear Jung's memory echoing within your soul. The true path does not seek witnesses. With this understanding, the second figure becomes crystal clear. You see that she doesn't just want company, she wants an audience. She doesn't just want to evolve, she wants to be seen evolving. And when you encounter this kind of energy, you realize there's no malice, only a deep fear. The fear of disappearing, the fear of not mattering, the fear that the inner silence is too great. And this fear creates a continuous need to prove, confirm, show. Spirituality becomes a stage. Awakening becomes a measure. Depth becomes decorum. This is where the unexpected turning point occurs. For a moment, you see yourself reflected in that person. You realize that at some point, you too tried to appear strong, wise, centered. You too wanted to be seen. You too sought approval. The difference is that now you see it clearly. And this clarity is liberating. There is no judgment, only the silent revelation that this path demands radical sincerity. It demands removing the masks that the ego insists on putting back on. It demands remembering that awakening is not proven. It is lived. At this point, you understand that protecting your light doesn't mean arrogantly withdrawing. It means preserving the inner space necessary for it to continue shining. It means choosing full presence over performance. It means recognizing that some encounters exist only to show you where you still need to grow. There is no rejection, only discernment. There is no escape, only spiritual responsibility. And then a question arises, even deeper than the one from the previous stage, a question that begins to echo in the back of the mind, like an omen. If the second figure is already so difficult to recognize, what kind of presence awaits you further down the path? The air seems to be changing. Something is silently brewing on the horizon of consciousness. There's a strange delicacy that begins to emerge within you after waking up, as if all your senses have been retuned. Common things, the steam escaping from the pan, the light filtering through the curtain, the distant sound of a dog, begin to carry subtle meanings. It's as if each small event is a coded message, a silent invitation to see beyond the surface. And with this heightened sensitivity, you realize you are more permeable, more open, more able to capture nuances that previously went unnoticed. Carl Jung said that the unconscious finds ways to communicate when the ego loosens its defenses, and you begin to notice exactly that. Unexpected messages coming from predictable places. This openness, however, makes you not only more sensitive to the light, but also to the shadows of others. It's a curious paradox. While you feel more connected to existence, you also perceive the chains that some carry without realizing it. A longtime friend, for example, begins to seek you out with a strange gleam in her eyes, that gleam that mixes admiration with dependence. A colleague always appears when your energy is most serene, as if sniffing out your silence. A person you barely knew starts sending long messages, full of endless pain, hoping you will be the port where they can unload everything. You feel compassion, of course, but above all, you feel the weight. And this weight begins to alter the way you breathe. But why do so many people start to approach you precisely when you are most vulnerable? What is it that triggers in them this impulse to lean on you, as if your presence were an emotional lifeline? Would you do the same if you were in their place? It is in this tenuous scenario that the third figure on the path emerges, one who does not compete, does not preach, does not show superiority. On the contrary, they approach with humility, fragility, and even sweetness. And it is precisely this that makes their influence so difficult to perceive. This figure carries with them a void they wish to fill, a hole that seems to expand each time someone tries to embrace it. It's as if this person's pain were a leaky container. The more you offer, the more they lose, and without realizing it, you try to keep filling it, believing that all that's missing is a little more attention, a little more listening, a little more energy, so that finally they will get up. But that never happens. The dynamic repeats itself like an invisible pattern. You offer understanding and she receives it. You offer guidance and she absorbs it. You offer comforting silence and she transforms it into a request. Each encounter, each conversation, each message carries the feeling that you owe something, as if your peace were a public resource, always available. And the more you try to illuminate this person's life, the more she returns with new shadows, requesting more, draining more, asking for more. It is at this point that tenderness transforms into exhaustion. The heart wants to help, but the body betrays it. Breathing becomes short. The mind races, the chest tightens. And then, on one of those ordinary days, you find yourself wondering, why do I always leave these conversations more exhausted than when I went in? At what point did compassion turn into burnout? And what is the line that separates helping from losing yourself? These questions begin to pierce the surface of your behavior, and the deeper you delve, the more you realize that, unintentionally, you've become a source of energy for someone who can't find their own. This isn't cruelty on her part, it's a lack of awareness. Jung would remind us that many live so far from their own center that they seek in others the power they cannot access. And you, with your new inner light, become a beacon, attractive, comforting, available. But beacons aren't meant to be embraced, but rather to guide from a distance. When someone tries to grasp them, both are hurt. It is at this moment that life presents an unexpected symbolic image. Perhaps you are at home alone, and you notice an insect drawn to the lamp. It repeatedly hits the warm surface of the bulb, insisting on reaching the glow. You observe with a strange feeling the confusion of the small creature trying to unite with the light that hurts it, and suddenly you understand. It's not malice, it's instinct. It doesn't know it's hurting itself trying to touch what illuminates it. It only feels the impulse to approach. The awareness is yours, not its. And it is you who must act with care. At that moment, the revelation emerges. You are not responsible for this person's emptiness. You are not responsible for the wounds, the repetitions, the dramas they relive. You can offer presence, but you cannot offer salvation. That word, in fact, carries a weight that should never be in the hands of an awakened human being. You can only offer what is natural, momentary comfort, genuine listening, sensitive guidance. But you can never give your own vital energy like someone donating blood without limit. And then another inevitable question arises. If you don't set a limit, who will set it for you? If you don't protect your light, how can you continue to illuminate your own path? This is where courage needs to come in. Not grandiose, heroic courage, but the silent courage of saying no with love, of stepping away respectfully, of creating distance without resentment. It sounds simple when said like that. But in practice it hurts, especially because this person, so fragile and so needy, may interpret your distancing as rejection, abandonment, coldness. But you need to see beyond that. You need to see with symbolic eyes. Distancing yourself is not punishment, it's protection. And not just yours, it's theirs too. Because as long as you feed the dependency, they will never learn to walk alone. And then you realize something you didn't expect. True compassion isn't about saying yes to everything. True compassion is about discernment. It's about recognizing the limit before it transforms into irreversible exhaustion. It's knowing that by refusing to carry that person, you are giving them the chance, perhaps for the first time, to look within themselves for what they seek outside. This gesture is an act of profound love, not of cruel distancing. And when you understand this, you feel a sudden relief, as if your soul were breathing for the first time in days. But one last question looms on the horizon, thin as a blade of light. In protecting yourself from such a subtle figure, aren't you about to encounter an even more challenging presence along the way? This question remains in the air, like a silent harbinger of what is to come. There's a peculiar moment when you realize you no longer react to the world as you once did. It's not something grand, nor is it something anticipated. It's a feeling that creeps in slowly, like that breeze that arrives before the change in weather. You notice that your responses diminish in intensity, that your impulses soften, that your gaze no longer focuses solely on the immediate. There's a new space between you and things, a slower breath, an almost unexpected lucidity. And it's in this new posture towards the world that you encounter the fourth figure, the one that presents itself with such convincing elegance that it almost seems harmless. It's the rational skeptic, the guardian of intellect, the master of certainties, the silent destroyer of mystery. And it's here that the narrative takes an unexpected turn, because this figure doesn't announce itself with shadows, but with overwhelming clarity. You recognize him in the details. He approaches you with questions that seem legitimate, with phrases that sound intelligent, with explanations that seek to dismantle what you feel. Perhaps you're in a casual encounter, talking about something simple, a symbolic dream, a premonition, an improbable coincidence. You describe the episode delicately, almost reverently, because you feel that there's something there that transcends logic. But before you even finish the sentence, he interrupts you with a physiological theory, an everyday statistic, a formula that explains everything, and you feel the magic vanish into thin air like vapor touched by the wind. There's an elegant coldness in his words, as if all the charm were merely a failure of perception. Jung always warned that excessive rationality, without connection to the unconscious, becomes a prison. And you perceive this in the presence of this interlocutor who needs to reduce the mystery to the measurable, as if he were afraid to look directly at what he doesn't control. And then an inevitable question arises. Why does this person need to dismantle the mystery to feel safe? What exactly is threatening them when you express something that doesn't fit the square shape of logical reasoning? This question echoes in your mind as you observe him. He's not rude nor aggressive. He's often cordial, polite, even kind. But there's a specific glint in his eye, a glint that betrays a need to dominate the conversation. When you say something from the heart, he responds with numbers. When you offer an intuition, he replies with research. When you express astonishment, he responds with cynicism. And the most curious thing is that, despite his firm tone, there's something broken inside. You notice it when he looks away after a categorical statement, as if behind that absolute reason there's an old wound, a disillusionment he tries to hide at all costs. Perhaps he loved deeply and was rejected. Perhaps he believed in something that crumbled. Perhaps he trusted someone who betrayed him. It's impossible to know, but you feel, even unintentionally, that his sarcasm is a shield. It's not there to attack you, but to protect what he tries not to feel. One day you have the opportunity to see this figure in action in an even more revealing way. You're in a restaurant, observing the tables around you. A family is chatting animatedly. 2 children are laughing too loudly. A lady next to you observes the street through the window with profound serenity. The skeptic sitting across from you comments, "Children only laugh like that because they still don't understand anything about life." It's a simple comment, but one that carries weight. You ask why he thinks that way, and he responds with a cold explanation about the lack of awareness in children, ignoring the spontaneous beauty of the moment. It is then that you notice something improbable. The lady who was looking out the window turns for a second and fixes her eyes on you. She seems to notice something in the air, perhaps the invisible density of that comment. And without saying anything, she simply smiles with such profound calm that it completely dismantles the previous logic. It's as if the world had offered a silent answer, a reminder that the mystery is greater than any discourse. And for a brief moment, you notice the skeptic's face waver, as if that serenity had touched something he was trying to hide. The scene unsettles him. How can someone so firm in their convictions be shaken by a simple glance? What unspoken stories does he carry? And what happens when you, awake, linger too long beside someone who considers enchantment naivete? This unease returns during other encounters. You realize that, in seeking endless justifications, the skeptic isn't looking for truth. He's looking for security. He wants fixed answers so as not to revisit his inner wounds. He wants clear explanations so as not to confront the chaos of the unconscious. Jung always asserted that whoever avoids mystery avoids himself, and you see this before your eyes. Someone who tries to organize the world because he cannot organize his own pain. In each encounter, he tries to adjust his breadth to the narrow format of his certainties. You begin to minimize your perceptions, reducing their brilliance so as not to provoke disagreements. And little by little, without realizing it, you shrink. This raises another crucial question. To what extent are you willing to lower your depth so as not to disturb those who are afraid to dive? This question lingers, pulsing silently, until something unexpected happens. You're at home reading a passage from an old diary, and you find a seemingly banal entry. "Today I felt a shiver when I woke up, as if something was calling me out of my routine." It seems simple, but something in that sentence ignites a forgotten memory. You remember that before waking up, you too were afraid of that inner voice. You too sought explanations for not hearing the call. You too hid your sensitivity behind arguments. And then you understand something crucial. You could have become exactly like the skeptic, who tries to convince you that everything is an illusion. The difference is that you followed the call while he ignored you. This unexpected and almost poetic realization opens up a new inner space. You understand that it's not necessary to fight the skeptic, nor to avoid them aggressively. Simply don't allow their cynicism to take root within you. Simply protect the spark of your own experience, keeping it alive, intact, clean. And upon realizing this, you feel a sudden relief. A lightness returns to your body, as if you had recovered something you almost lost. It's not rejection, it's discernment. And then, when you can finally cross the territory of skepticism without losing sight of the light, you encounter the fifth figure. It emerges as a promise of relief, as someone who seems to understand you deeply. Unlike the previous figures, this one comes with warmth, with surrender, with devotion. It is the savior of souls, the one who wants to heal, guide, protect, fix. And it is here that the path narrows again, because this figure approaches offering help, but in truth desires to be needed. It offers itself as support, but expects dependence. It extends its hand, but wants to hold it forever. And then comes the final question of this passage, as profound as a crack in the unconscious. If you have already learned to avoid those who drain you, who compare you, and who belittle you, how will you deal with someone who tries to save you from what only you can overcome? The question remains open, inviting you to continue walking. There's a subtle, almost imperceptible moment when you realize the soul savior isn't really trying to help you. He's trying to justify himself through you. He approaches with sweet words, with promises of healing, with the certainty that he understands what you're going through. And perhaps he does understand, but this understanding comes loaded with a hidden desire for importance. He wants to be indispensable, to be the one who in some way guides your journey, illuminates your path, shapes your destiny. And it's precisely here that something inside you begins to contract, as if instinct itself recognizes the trap before the mind even realizes it. It's a subtle tightness in the chest, a strange vibration, a feeling that something is being pulled off your axis. Jung always spoke about the danger of unconscious identifications, and you begin to notice that the savior is actually trying to do exactly that, become part of your identity. The dynamic is almost theatrical. The savior creates a narrative in which you are the character who needs him. And the more you try to maintain your firm presence, the more he intensifies his role as guide. He offers to advise, interpret, and guide, as if he had a special vision reserved only for him. At times, this figure even anticipates your needs, as if he could foresee your steps. It seems generous, but there is something unsettling about this anticipation, because it doesn't stem from listening, but from the need to maintain the role he has assumed. You realize this when, disagreeing with something, he expresses a slight, almost imperceptible frustration, as if he were losing ground within your story. He doesn't just want to be by your side, he wants to be above you. And that's when the first real tension of this stage arises. Are you starting to walk with steps that aren't your own? At what point did this care, offered with such intensity, begin to surround, restrict, and mold you? The question doesn't arise from the mind, but from the body. At a certain point during a quiet conversation, he comments on something about your life story, something you've never said aloud, but which he presumed to know. You feel a tingle on your skin, not because of the comment itself, but because of the certainty with which he claims to know his own shadow better than you do. At that moment, like a reflex, an old memory flashes through your mind. Jung warned that no one can cross the unconscious for you, because only you know where the ground gives way and where it stands firm. And when that memory arrives, you realize that there's something in the Savior's posture that tries to lead you to inner territories he himself hasn't traversed. He points out paths he hasn't walked, affirmations he hasn't experienced, promises he can't keep. This recognition creates a disruption in the relationship. You begin to feel the need to breathe alone, to think without external echo, to act without approval. The Savior perceives this immediately, perhaps even before you do. It's impressive how someone who builds their identity around helping others develops an almost instinctive sensitivity to detect when they are losing influence. They change their tone. They speak with more urgency, perhaps more sweetness, perhaps with a touch of calculated sadness. They know that their strength lies not in their presence, but in the idea that you need them. And when that idea is threatened, the game changes. It is at this moment that a silent turning point begins to form. You decide to try the simple act of not asking for advice. Just one day, just one choice. Something small, almost insignificant. However, this gesture ignites an invisible flame in the relationship. The Savior senses that the cycle has begun to break. And then you hear, for the first time, a tone of concern that doesn't sound entirely sincere. He asks if you're okay, but the question sounds more like a reminder. Don't forget that I'm needed. And that's when something inside you awakens forcefully, as if you've been sleeping too long. What is this force that is emerging now? Why does it grow precisely when someone tries to guide it too much? And what is the risk of allowing this figure to continue determining its steps? This force is ancient. It's the individuation instinct that Jung exalted as the essential engine of the soul. It's the internal pressure to be whole, not driven. This instinct comes into play with such clarity that you can almost hear it pulsing. And from it you begin to see your relationship with the Savior in a different light. You notice that it is skilled at transforming your doubts into opportunities to reinforce its own relevance. When you express uncertainty, it offers ready-made answers. When you express discomfort, it says it's there to alleviate it. When you express a desire to walk alone, it warns you about the dangers of doing so. The intention may even be good, but it carries a psychological weight. You realize that the Savior keeps you small in order to remain great. One night, you have a dream unlike anything you've ever experienced. In the dream, you're climbing a narrow staircase towards a soft light. With each step you feel lighter, more aware, more centered. But someone behind you tries to hold your ankle, as if afraid you'll climb too fast. The hand is firm, insistent, almost desperate. You try to turn to see who it is, but the light is too bright. Upon waking, the feeling remains. That hand didn't want to knock you down, it only wanted to keep you close. It held you out of fear, not malice. And that's precisely what the dream reveals. The Savior fears losing you because, without you, they lose their own role. They lose the function that sustains their identity. It's painful to realize this, because this figure isn't an enemy. It's just someone lost, trying to find meaning in life through another person. And then a question arises, so profound it almost sounds like a whisper from the unconscious itself. How much of yourself are you sacrificing to avoid hurting someone who depends on you? This question initiates a definitive change. You begin to distance yourself slowly, gently, and respectfully. There is no drama, no confrontation, no accusations, only silence, discernment, and firmness. And it is precisely at this moment that the reversal intensifies. The Savior, realizing he is losing ground, tries to bring you back by offering a kind of hasty comfort. I know what you're feeling. But this time, you realize something you had never realized before. He doesn't know. He never knew. He doesn't know your soul. He doesn't know your shadows. He doesn't know your abysses. He only knows the projections he placed upon you. This recognition is liberating. You feel lighter, more stable, more whole. For the first time in a long time, there is a clean silence within you. No external expectations, no emotional demands, no dependencies disguised as care. And it is in this silence that something great happens. You feel an inner calling, a profound movement that announces you are closer to something important, something that has been building since the beginning of your awakening. And then, with sudden clarity, another question arises. If all these figures appeared to shape your strength, your sensitivity, and your discernment, what exactly awaits you in the final stage of this journey? The question remains open, vibrating deep within the soul like an unavoidable invitation. There comes a point in the journey when you realize that everything that seemed external, the encounters, the symbolic figures, the invisible tensions, wasn't just about the other person. It was about you, about the inner parts that still needed to emerge, take shape, be recognized. Each person who crossed your path since the beginning of your awakening acted as a mirror, as a shadow, as a whisper from the unconscious trying to guide your steps. And it is precisely here, on the threshold of conclusion, that reality reveals itself with unprecedented clarity. It's no longer about the people you should avoid, it's about the consciousness you should cultivate. Carl Jung said that nothing external has enough power to bring us down without an inner part giving permission. And you begin to perceive the depth of this statement when you look back and remember each presence that tried to divert you from your own center. The gentleness of awakening doesn't eliminate life's complexity. It only changes how you navigate that complexity. You understand now that the world will remain the same for many, but you are no longer the same. The words that once unsettled you now sound distant, like echoes of a reality that no longer belongs to you. The dramas that once held you captive now seem small, incapable of touching the core of your consciousness, and the attempt to satisfy others' expectations loses its meaning when you finally understand that the only voice you need to hear is the one born from your own inner silence. This discernment is not arrogance, it is spiritual maturity. It is the certainty that clarity is a form of love. Looking at each figure you encountered, the one who denied your awakening, the one who compared you, the one who drained your energy, the one who extinguished your charm, and the one who tried to save you, you realize something surprising. Each one expresses a universal human aspect. At some point in your life, you too have been each of them. You have doubted others, competed without realizing it, drained others unintentionally, used reason as a shield, and tried to save those who didn't even want to be saved. This recognition doesn't generate guilt, but rather compassion. In a kind of silent revelation, you finally understand that awakening doesn't separate you from others, it only makes you capable of seeing them more deeply. But this understanding by itself is not enough. The true conclusion of this journey requires you to transform this clarity into practice. And here an unexpected tension arises. How to live in the world without getting lost in it. How to keep your consciousness active without becoming rigid. How to protect your light without building walls around your heart. The answer appears simply, almost unassumingly, as if it came from a very ancient region of the soul. The path is presence, nothing more, nothing less. Being whole in every gesture, in every word, in every choice. Being attentive to the subtle signals of the body, to changes in the internal rhythm, to the emotions that arise and disappear. Being aware of the moment when you begin to distance yourself from yourself to please others, when you diminish yourself to fit in, when you distract yourself to avoid feeling. The practice begins with details so small they seem irrelevant. Upon waking, for example, you notice something has changed. Your breathing is deeper, your mind less hurried. Instead of rushing to fulfill obligations, you start the day feeling your body for a minute, just 1 minute. That, in itself, already alters the course of the morning. At work, when someone raises their voice or tries to impose their vision, you feel the reaction rising in your chest, but you also feel the awareness observing that reaction. And noticing both things at the same time, you choose to respond, not react. When you encounter someone who insists on dramatizing, you listen, but you don't take on the drama as your own responsibility. When you cross paths with a skeptic, you smile and move on without needing to explain yourself. And when you find someone trying to save you, you appreciate the intention, but you walk on your own 2 feet. These gestures seem simple, yet they are silent revolutions. They break patterns that have repeated themselves for years, perhaps decades. They re-educate the unconscious, which gradually learns to trust the new center you have built. And throughout this constant practice, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to respond. Small coincidences begin to emerge. Unexpected encounters become more meaningful. A sense of synchronicity is established. It's as if reality adjusts its pace to walk alongside you. Jung saw these significant coincidences as symbolic messages, and you now understand this firsthand. Awakening opens eyes that were previously closed, and what once seemed like chance reveals itself as guidance. However, there is a final twist, a last layer that needs to be seen before you fully complete this journey. When you begin to live more consciously, the world doesn't necessarily become lighter, it becomes more truthful, and truth sometimes weighs heavily. You perceive fragilities you previously ignored, feel pains you previously numbed, acknowledge renunciations you previously postponed. And this can be frightening. For a moment, you might think you're regressing, that the path has become more difficult. But the truth is exactly the opposite. This weight is a sign that you have entered the deepest layers of your own soul. It is at this point that many give up, but it is here that awakening truly solidifies. Not when you feel enlightened, but when you learn to traverse your own darkness without running away from yourself. And then comes the most important moment of this final part. The instant when you look at yourself honestly and ask the question that sums up the entire journey. Who do you become now that no one else can guide your life for you? There are no more masks, no more expectations from others, no more dependencies, comparisons, or imposed doubts. There is only you and the vastness of your own consciousness. The answer doesn't come as a thought. It comes as a feeling, a quiet firmness that is born in the center of your chest and expands to the edge of your skin. A subtle but stable certainty that you can finally walk freely. Not the freedom that excludes the world, but the freedom that includes it, without getting lost in it. This is where closure takes shape, as if each previous part had prepared this moment. The goal was never to push people away, but to bring you closer to yourself. It was never to reject the world, but to learn to inhabit it consciously. It was never to deny the shadows, but to illuminate them calmly. Life will continue to be full of encounters, challenges, surprises, conflicts, and enchantments, and you will continue learning, making mistakes, adjusting, and growing. But now there is something that didn't exist before, an inner axis, a point of balance that is not easily shaken. A clarity that accompanies you even on turbulent days, a silent presence that observes everything and says, without saying, "You have already awakened. Continue." And so, as we conclude this symbolic journey, we receive the most important invitation of all. Apply these steps, these insights, and these practices to your own life. Observe your relationships more attentively. Choose more consciously where you invest your energy. Allow yourself to grow without fear of leaving behind what doesn't accompany your expansion. And above all, walk with the quiet courage of someone who knows that awakening is not destiny, but a continuous process. If this script touched you in any way, please like this video so it reaches more people. Share your feelings in the comments, even anonymously if you prefer, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of awareness, reflection, and transformation. Your presence here makes all the difference.